Hey everybody, how's it going? Let's talk about your home recording studio. Today, we're going to do part 2 of the Behringer U-Phoria 404HD review. In part 1, we basically got it out of the box, got it configured, up and running, got the latency kind of set and everything, and just recorded a simple project through it with a little bit of audio, with some direct instruments, and then some instruments through microphones. So in part 1, I didn't really get to touch on everything that I wanted to touch on, in just recording a simple project. So here in part 2, let's take a look at basically 3 main things that I want to cover that I didn't touch on in part 1. First, let's take a look at the inserts and see how to use those. Next, let's take a look at that Montor A B button and see what the heck that thing does. And then let's try to use our extra outputs to route a signal from a project out to some outboard gear and back into the project. So basically trying to do some post-production and add some effects after recording has, after tracking has already happened. All right, so first let's take a look at the inserts. First thing you're gonna need is a special cable. I know nobody likes to hear that whenever you're trying to get your interface set up and doing something you want, but trust me, it's worth buying the cables that you need. Now, I'm gonna watch my voice, don't let my wife hear me say that because she thinks I've got too many cables as it is, but in this case, you do need an extra cable. So here, let's take a quick look. All right, so to use a channel insert, you're going to need an insert cable. And what an insert cable is on one end, it is a TRS, a 1/4 inch TRS, a tip ring sleeve. And on the other end, it's actually breaks out into 2 separate TS, just tip sleeve connectors here. So this end goes into the insert, and it has both a send and a receive based on whether it's sending to the tip or the ring. And then you use these as the in and out of the device you want to go to. So let's hook that up here real quick. Okay, so let's just pick on channel 1 here, right? So here on channel 1, I'm going to put the TRS side of the cable into the channel 1 insert. Okay, and now that it's plugged into the insert, but I don't have the other end plugged into anything, if I tried to send a signal, like if I plugged a microphone into input number 1 on the front, I wouldn't hear anything. I wouldn't get any signal or anything because the entire signal flows through this insert cable. So now that I don't have it plugged into anything, there's nothing completing the circuit. So it's basically just a broken circuit, so I'm not going to get any sound. Okay, now what I want to do with these, I want to send this through a compressor. So let's send it through like, this compressor here, this distressor here. So I have that plugged into a patch base. So, okay, now these are labeled on this side of which is the ring and which is the tip. I know, I'm just going to take a guess that this insert on the UMC404 sends on the tip. So I'm going to treat the tip as kind of my output. And so I'm going to plug that into, let's go into one of my distressors here. And sorry about the focus, I got the lights kind of dim in here and my autofocus is not cooperating. Okay, and I'm going to treat the ring as the return, and so I'm going to plug that into the output of that compressor. So now we should have a total completed circuit going from input number 1, from the preamp of input number 1, and it should come out the tip here and go into an external device and come back out of that external device and come back on the ring. And then continue its flow, through all the other stuff that it flows through here. So let's see if that worked. So what I'm going to do is plug in a microphone. I've got my trusty LCT 440 over here. So I'm just going to take, just like with the SM81 for our last microphone adventure with this, it's just a regular XLR male to XLR female cable. So I'm just going to plug it straight into, let's just do, since I'm using insert number 1, let's just use channel number 1. So we'll plug it in right here. Doing this one-handed is not very easy. Okay, there we go. Let's see, I'll just set the gain, just kind of arbitrarily pick, I'll set the gain maybe about there or so. I'm gonna, since I'm using the XLR input here, it won't matter whether I have the line or instrument switch engaged for this channel. That only pertains to the TRS connector. The pad, I'll leave the pad disengaged. I will need the phantom power on, so I'm going to reach around back here and flip that on. We get our little red indicator light. So if I just kind of speak into the mic here, I'll just kind of get close to it, and hopefully, yeah, I get some indicator, little signal indicator there, the green kind of blinking light. So I'm not going to be hollering or anything, but let's kind of turn it up until it clips. I saw a little bit of clip there, so, you know, turn it back down, and I think that'll be good for our purposes here. Okay, I switched over to audio from the microphone, so you're just hearing me through that mic, through channel 1 here. And let's go ahead and take a look over here. And I had this bypass, so I'm going to turn this off of bypass here. And let's just select maybe a 4:1 ratio here. But I'm not really seeing much activity here on the gain reduction. So let's make sure, let's just crank up the gain here. And here, let me turn the attack and the release just a little more normal settings. Yeah, there we go. Now we're seeing some activity actually on the compressor here. So we are sending a signal out from the preamp into the compressor and back, and now we're monitoring. I've got the direct monitor, which you may not be able to see, but I got the direct monitor turned all the way to input here, so we're just monitoring straight off of what this input's recording. And yeah, you know, that sounds great. You know, we're so hopefully here, if we do something like turn our gain down, yep, it gets quieter. If we turn our gain up, yeah, it gets louder. Okay, so let's set that back to a normal kind of setting there. So, all right, we did it. Yeah, I think the insert seems to work just fine. It's doing exactly what we would expect it to do. So, all right, let's call that one done. Okay, so yeah, that's what the insert is for. You feed it through an outboard piece of gear on the way in, and you record it through that so that it's going to get printed on whatever track you record. So if we bring up our DAW, tell it to record from input 1, which is what we were plugged into there, what the mic's plugged into, hit record, it's going to record what it hears through the compressor. So it's going to print that affected track. There's no undo. So I don't typically record that way, but hey, you might like to record that way. I know a lot of people do, so nothing wrong with it. And yeah, so that's how you would do that. All right, next we're going to take a look at that Montor A/B switch and kind of at the same time get an idea of how all of the outputs actually behave on this thing. So if you take a look at the back of the unit, you see there's all sorts of outputs, right? You know, we've got, well, you know, we have a MIDI out, of course, but we've got, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 playback outputs. We got 2 main outputs. So how in the world do 6 outputs behave when this is just a 4 output interface? It's a 404 HD, which indicates it's a 4 in, 4 out. It looks like we have more outputs. And as I've come to find out, it's a little deceiving. So let's see if we can kind of come up with a way to illustrate what outputs are paired together maybe, or how the outputs behave when from your DAW you tell it, all right, send a signal out of this output. And let's see how it behaves, and let's see how the Montor A/B function kind of affects that. And the way that I tend to illustrate this is with a whole mess of patch cables. Let's get started here. I've got main outs are the 2 red cables, and they're going into ADAT 1 and 2 on my interface. The orange cables are playback 1 and 2, and they're going to inputs 3 and 4, on my, ADAT 3 and 4. The yellow cables are playback 3 and 4, and they're going to 5 and 6 down here. And then the headphones are this black insert cable, so it's taking the stereo headphone out and splitting it into left and right, and sending it to 7 and 8 ADAT. Now on the computer, I've got, this is the total mix for RME, and so the inputs that we're looking at, this AS 1 and 2, that's my ADAT 1 and 2. Here's ADAT 3 and 4, ADAT 5 and 6, ADAT 7 and 8. So this is the main output of the 404. This is playback 1 and 2. This is playback 3 and 4. And this is the headphones. So in a project, let's flip over here to the project, and let's, like, I don't know, let's solo the kick. So in order for you to hear what's happening here, let's pick a couple of outputs from my interface, which you can't quite see through this whole jungle of cables here, but we're going to take a couple of outputs from my interface and send it into the recorder here. And then hopefully you'll be able to kind of hear what's going on as and I'm monitoring off the recorder as well, so we should be hearing the same thing ideally. Let's see if this works. Okay, so on the computer here, I have just soloed the kick from our project here. So if we press play here, we're gonna hear it. It's a little quiet, but I think that's just what we're gonna have to deal with for right now. But we can see activity on the kick track that's being sent to its parent folder, which is kind of like a drum bus. And then that drum bus is being sent to the master bus. And the master bus is being sent out output 1 and 2 of our interface. So if we go and look at total mix here, we can see, well, interestingly enough, we have, we're only seeing that on playback 1 and 2. That's what this 8.3 and 4 represents, is the playback output. Okay, so we're not hearing it out of the master, out of the main left and right outputs, which that was red over here. We're only hearing it out of playback 1 and 2. And I think that is because this fella right here, we are set entirely to direct monitor. So here, let's, there we go. So let's just, so let's just do a mix of direct monitor and playback. And you can hear it got much louder because now we should be hearing it. Yeah, so now we're getting it basically in triplicate. So it's going out our main outputs, but it's also going out playback 1 and 2, and it's also going out the headphone output. Okay, that makes sense. So this playback 1 and 2, what the heck? What's going on with that? Okay, so let's see what happens if we click the Monitor A, B button. I'm not sure which position it's in now. There's really no indication. It's just in or out. And I'm not sure which one, represents A or B. So I'm just going to push it in. So that's just the opposite of whatever it was. And now the headphones aren't picking up any of that. The only thing we're getting is out the main output and out playback 1 and 2. So I think what I found, through playing with this is that here, I'll stop the kick there, is that the playback output 1 and 2 are always tied to the main output 1 and 2. And so whatever you send to output 1 and 2, it comes out playback output 1 and 2 and main output 1 and 2. So it's like they're duplicates of each other. So that kind of explains how this is a 4 output interface and we have 6 discrete output jacks on the back of the device. So that caused me no end of frustration trying to figure this out and trying to route things out and getting weird echoes and slapbacks and trying to send something to outboard gear over channel 1 or channel 2. And I'm getting the whole mix out of that. Oh, it was driving me absolutely batty. So what we want to do is stay away from output 1 and 2 for trying to route outboard gear to it. Now, as far as that Monitor A-B switch, all that seems to do is control what the headphones hear. Are the headphones listening to output 1 and 2, or are the headphones listening to output 3 and 4? And so as we just saw, once we flip the button from the A position to the B position, all that did was defeat the headphones hearing what was going out, the main outputs, which are outputs 1 and 2. So that Monitor A-B button seems to only affect the headphones and what the headphones are hearing. Okay, so with all that in mind, how in the world do we use these 4 outputs in order to loop in some outboard gear in post-production? So we learned how to loop in outboard gear as we're recording, but how do we do it in post? And let's take a look and let's figure out how to do that. So what I'm going to do is use an instance of RIA insert, which you can see I've tried all sorts of stuff on this kick. Let me get rid of whatever compressor is on there. I have RIA insert in here somewhere. There he is. And since it's a mono signal, I'm going to send it out. I'm going to assign the left and right and RIA insert both to output 3. It's a mono signal, so we only need one output. And just to avoid confusion, let's come back in on input 3 for left and right. Again, mono signal, so we just need one input. Okay, so let's take, let's see here, that was the orange, so let's just take this fella, and instead of plugging him into my interface, let's plug him into the input of one of those compressors. Let's plug him in, right here. And now let's grab another another patch cable, and let's come out of that compressor, and let's go in to one of the inputs on the device here. Okay, and so that's input number 3. And so input number 3 here, we can see we've got like a little bit of gain added. We want to make darn sure we're on the line input here, because that compressor is outputting a line level signal, which is substantially hotter than an instrument signal. So don't turn on the instrument setting here. And I'm going to leave the pad off as well. I'm just, again, going to kind of arbitrarily dial in some gain here. So let's leave it, maybe about right there. And now that we have RIA insert telling it, and we better activate RIA insert here, we have RIA insert telling it, okay, go out, output number 3, and come back, input number 3. So that should loop in, let's see, it was this, this top compressor here. And let's just kind of, say, yeah, I'll do the 10-to-1. Let's kind of do the kind of preset opto settings here. So let's go, 10 on the attack, 0 on the release. We got it 10-to-1. And yeah, we'll leave the distortion on there. So I'll get my gain kind of set here. And let's get our input level set about right in the middle, because we don't really know what to expect as far as signal strength. So I'm going to kind of err on the side of caution here. Okay, so now if I press play, okay, and what I want to do here is let's not direct monitor, because we've got an input coming in back from the compressor here, so we don't really want to listen directly to that. Let's listen to it only through the DAW. So I'm going to turn the mix knob all the way just to playback, which I'm not sure if you can see there. Sorry, my lighting kind of sucks here, but I got the mix knob all the way to playback. So we're not going to mix in direct signal from the input here. Of course, I picked the wrong one. I plugged playback 1 into it. So let's actually pick playback 3 this time, and do this correctly. So hopefully now, there we go. Now, one of our signs of success here, one is that, okay, we are getting an output signal, so at least Reaper thinks that it's sending it out, output 3. But our sign of success here is that we're getting a return signal. So this is perfect. Okay, I will say that output signal is a little weak. It's not very strong. Behringer does supposedly, provide a way to control that. Unfortunately though, so if we go to their ASIO configuration and we take a look at the volume, so we have this input and output volume. So let's go to the output volume, and here's our main, our out 1, 2, 3, and 4. But the problem is they max out at 0. You can't boost at all. All you can do is attenuate the signal. And it's already too quiet. So this isn't going to do us any good. So let's just kill that. And we'll say OK here. Now Reaper does have a way, right here. You can see this is set to, 0 dB of a gain level. But it gives us a little bit of headroom here. So we may have to crank it a little bit. So I tell you what, let's just press play, and let's turn this up. So I have the input on my compressor set to its just default 5 position, and we're not seeing any gain reduction at all. So I have a feeling if I go and turn this up, yeah, like now we start to see some gain reduction, but I've got to pretty much max it out here to get anything. So let's just set that back to its kind of, default-ish. And instead, let's crank up our output. Let's give it like maybe 3 dB. Let's give it another 3 dB. you know, somewhere around there. And okay, yeah, we're still not seeing much here, so let's just give it a little bit of goose here. But yeah, so now we're actually seeing activity on the gain reduction here, so we know our signal's going through that. Okay, now on our return volume up here, it's coming through just a little hot, so I'm gonna just use my makeup gain and turn that down a little bit, and maybe, you know, get it to where we're safely below 0. We'll reset our little peak indicator here, and so, you know, yeah, coming back in the 5s. That's okay. So now, I guess our kind of true test here is what happens when we unsolo the kick? Are we gonna just have a disaster and have the whole mix sent to this compressor rather than just the kick? So right now, since the kick is going to the main, we are hearing it on our main outputs and our headphones. And since it's going to main, we're hearing it on playback 1 and 2 as well. But I no longer have playback 3 plugged into my interface. Instead, playback 3 is plugged into the compressor. So we're not seeing signal here. Instead, we're seeing signal on the compressor, on the gain reduction meter, the compressor itself. So I think that's a good sign. So let's cross our fingers. Let's unsolo the kick and make sure that only the kick is going through the compressor. Wow, that's loud. Okay, I am going to, this is the output of the interface that we're listening to everything on. Since I've got everything routed so kind of funky, it's going to sound distorted and super, super loud because we're basically hearing 3 different versions of the mix, or 3 versions of the mix all summed together. So that's going to be super loud, and it's still going to sound kind of distorted, but I'm going to turn the output kind of way down. But let's listen to the mix here real quick. Yeah, it sounds distorted, which is kind of weird. But we can see the compressor is only clamping down on the kick. Which is what we want, right? So we haven't sent the entire mix through that one input. Instead, we've just sent the kick through that one input, which is what we wanted. Hey, here it is. I'm sitting editing this video, and I had to stop recording abruptly because some company came over and it was just kind of chaos here, so I just kind of had to stop all of a sudden. So it just kind of felt weird as I was editing it, having that just weird abrupt ending with no sign off or anything. I think that I said everything that I wanted to say in part 2 of the review. I might do another video or 2 about this thing in the future, maybe as I use it a little bit more. But everything that I said about the routing really comes from, you know, my perspective of how I intend to use it, or how I would use it, right? I like routing stuff out and back in and post, and so that's kind of my main use case there. So there are some other resources that I found around YouTube and the web where you can get a little bit more information, you know, from a different perspective about how the routing works. The YouTube channel Audio Dabbler did a really in-depth video about all the routing and everything, and it's definitely taking a look at that one. I'll link it in the description below. And on GitHub, you can find a really nice signal flow diagram for the UMC404HD from Ken Mitchell, and I'll link that down in the description below as well. All right, I think that'll do it for me this time, and I will see you guys next time.